Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last part, we once again continued our trek across Hoenn, catching a lot of legendaries in the process, and now it's time for us to continue doing that, but only for a little bit longer. We actively do plot progress this part, so hey, if you've been waiting for me to finally go tackle Evergrande City into Victory Road, congrats! We're almost there. But first, I want to make sure I catch just a few more legendaries. Starting off, we're back at the Nameless Cavern that unlocks once again if you have at least 3 Pokemon with max friendship in your party. At this point, I am here between 8 o'clock p.m. and 8:59 p.m., so we're here to fight our second of the 3 notable Sinnoh Lake Guardians. This time around, instead of Mesprit, we're going to face probably my least favorite design of the 3. This is Uxie, or Uxie, I guess. Pure Psychic type with Levitate, so it is weak to Bug, Ghost, and Dark, but immune to Ground. While Mesprit was the very balanced member of this legendary trio, Uxie is very much the focused defender. It has a ridiculous defense and special defense stats, but its HP and attack stats leave a lot to be desired in a lot of circumstances. It's decently fast enough, though. Overall, this is probably my least favorite of these 3 to use, only because in my eyes, a legendary should be able to really throw some pain, and since this one really can't, on top of its learn set, it's cute, I guess, but it's one I just kind of leave in the distance. Mind you, I think in general, there are definitely tiers within legendaries, of course. Heck, that's even the case over when it comes to, like, tiers and all that people figure out through competitive. But I'd say in general, the Lake Guardians are definitely on the lower tier of legendaries, if only because while their stats are good, if there are legendaries with just better stats outright. But at least, hey, I got into the Ultra Ball pretty quickly. Now, there is a distinct reason I actively move on from legendary hunting this part, but I'll talk about that in a few moments. First off, let's talk about Uxie, the Knowledge Pokemon. It is said that its emergence gave humans the intelligence to improve their quality of life, and we have not really used it well since. After this, we're gonna go crash back in at the Trackless Forest, as I want to make sure I catch the next of the Johto legendary beasts really quick, just so I have that out of the way before the time's up for that one. So, yeah, legendary hunting at this point, I won't lie, even when I was recording, was starting to really wear on me. So, after just a few more in this part, I decided to get a move on just because I had other things I could do. There's also a factor of I wanted to make sure I had some legendaries left for post-game that weren't exclusively only in post-game, so I can maybe pace things out a little bit differently and keep things a little bit more interesting, both for me and you potentially watching. But at the same time, play the game how you like. So, in specific, I have entered the Trackless Forest here within the first 20 minutes of the given hour. So in this case, instead of Suicune like we encountered last time, we're instead going to be finding Raikou here. Raikou, for some reason, is also one that's given me a lot of shit over the years, but I think it's partially a factor of Suicune is usually a set encounter whenever I visit Johto, and Entei is usually the one I find myself using the Master Ball on as a roaming legendary. Raikou, just bad memories. So Raikou, pure electric type, so it is weak to ground exclusively. Raikou's special stats and speed are incredible, and while its physical stats aren't necessarily bad, it's definitely not this Pokemon's focus on the whole. I think in terms of use case, it's probably my favorite of the legendary beasts, but again, as I've said several times already, legendaries is something I try not to use unless otherwise forced on me, or if I at least want to just experiment around with how they feel. Most of the time when I'm playing a campaign, I really just don't like using it because I really do feel like it breaks balance in a way. Even though at the end of the day, Pokemon's as balanced a game as you like to make it when it comes to the main campaign, as you can just level grind the hell out of things and make some ridiculous movesets if you put the time into it that wouldn't really be viable in a competitive setting because there's more ways around it in a person-to-person context. But against the game's AI, there's not a lot to worry about. And again, hey, these legendaries are being very, very cooperative when it comes to getting into the Pokeballs. Raikou, the Thunder Pokemon. Raikou embodies the speed of lightning. The roars of this Pokemon send shockwaves shuddering through the air and shake the ground as if lightning bolts had come crashing down. I always felt kind of bad for Raikou, though, because they really were the ignored sibling of the 3, because Suicune was a box legendary and got some notable focus in a couple of the movies and anime episodes. Entei got a movie entirely to themselves, technically. Meanwhile, Raikou only got, what, an episode of that one OVA series, technically, on the whole? Right there, we got the Icy Rock from the receptionist over at the Weather Institute. That extends the Hail weather status to its fullest extent. Not something I use, but I might as well grab it. But we are back on Route 119 at this point, because since we have the Waterfall TM, I do want to make sure we finally fully explore this route before we move on, as really I just want to clean this up a little bit. I don't use Waterfall in the other location we can notably explore at this point, though, which is the entirety of Meteor Falls. I'm saving that for a very specific point in post-game, because it comes up there at that point anyway. Worth noting, though, in order to fully explore this area, you do need the Acro Bike, so make sure you have it. And specific, also make sure you talk to that NPC we see in the distance, the Ace Trader, as there's something a little bit important there. Speaking of a little bit important, there's an invisible Kecleon here, so in the case you haven't caught one yet for some reason, you might as well while you're here, because the set encounters are definitely a lot more convenient to catch than the very low encounter rate random battles against them. There's also notably a very important TM to a lot of very specific move sets up here that we can see right over there, and even though I don't take full advantage of the move, it is one that can be very powerful. In specific, that is the TM for the move Acrobatics. The way Acrobatics works is that its power is doubled if the user has no held item. For the exact numbers, I believe with a held item, that's like a 55 power move, but without a held item, it's a 110 power move, which is really good for its accuracy. Nice jump, so you can do that kind of stuff with a bike, too. Normally, make sure you actively talk to that NPC, as he's one of 3 very important NPCs to talk to with the bikes. We'll talk about the third one, though, in post-game, for reasons. A really good thing you can do with Acrobatics is have it be a secondary flying move on certain Pokemon, and have them have a held item like a berry or something that actively fades away across the battle, because then you can really surprise with some power out of nowhere, but at the same time, also just opening with it, if you don't have a held item by default, can be really good for any kind of PvE content in the game. I like it in general. Next up, we're back at the Pathless Plain, but in specific, we are here on a Tuesday or a Saturday, as it's time for us to catch the final of the 3 Swords of Justice from Unova that we've been finding on this area to begin with. And this is probably my favorite of the 3, honestly. To the point where, there's a good reason for that, this thing used to be absurd in the meta, if memory serves. This is Terrakion, a rock fighting type, so it is weak to fighting, ground, steel, water, grass, psychic, and fairy. Terrakion has a nuts physical attack stat, is decently fast, and its defenses aren't anything to really laugh at either. This Pokemon might have a lot of weaknesses, but trust me, in the right hands, this Pokemon is absurd. It's one of those that I believe got banned from certain fan-made competitive tiers for very good reason. This thing can be disgusting. And if I actively use a Sword of Justice, I'm using this one. Partially for the reasons they used it to begin with, but also just I think in general, well, I think it's my least favorite design of the 3. It's always just been one I found pretty reliable. I want to say especially on like my second or third playthrough of Black and White 2 specifically. I used this to get a pet because I just felt a little bit different that specific playthrough, which that's really what kind of changes whether or not I'll use the legendaries if I just feel like doing something very different. But at the same time, that's very rare because I'm very set in my ways when it comes to my rule sets with Pokemon and all that. But that's me. Other people will just use this, and yeah, it's good. It's a legendary, but it's also one of the better legendaries in a lot of instances. Notably, ability-wise, like the other Swords of Justice, this does still have Justified. So any Dark-type moves that hit it, its attack gets boosted. And notably, because it very often will just know Swords Dance by default, boosting its already great physical attack stat is very easy to do. Part of the reason why it's absurd. This definitely was a Pokemon compared to some of the other legendaries that resisted me a good bit when it came to getting to the Ultra Balls. I think I ended up cutting about 6.5 minutes coming up somewhere abouts. But again, compared to prior Pokemon LPs, the legendaries in this game behaved pretty well when it came to actively being caught. There really was like at least one instance per prior LP that just took forever. None of that really happened here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, at least thus far in the editing. I don't remember any really sticking out when it came to getting in the balls on the recording aspect, though, either. Worth noting in terms of editing, I've only edited through part 30 at this point for a very specific reason. There we go. 3 Swords of Justice down. The Pathless Plain is now complete. Worth noting, there is a fourth member to the Swords of Justice, Keldeo, that we brought up when we first accessed Mauville City. But there's no way to actively get one of those naturally here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. They were only in events. Terrakion, the Cavern Pokemon. Spoken of in legend, this Pokemon used its phenomenal power to destroy a castle in its effort to protect Pokemon. Next up, we're back at the Trackless Forest at this point because there's only one Pokemon left to get here. In specific, I am here between the 20th and 39th minute of the given hour because it's time for us to catch ourselves an Entei, who, personally to me, is still the poster boy of this trio, despite Suicune probably getting a lot more representation on the whole. Helps that they are specifically a box legendary that also got focus in the remake still. Entei is a pure fire type, so they're weak to ground, rock, and water. Out of the three legendary beasts, Entei is the most physically minded, having a really good HP stat and physical attack stat. Its defenses aren't the best, but it's still decently fast. You can do a lot of good stuff with this Pokemon. It's got a good learn set that leans physically as well. Ability-wise, it has Pressure by default, which is the default for a lot of these. But its hidden ability at this point in the series was Flash Fire, so if it gets hit with any fire-type attacks, not only is it treated as being immune to the attack, its own fire-type moves are boosted in power by 50%, which is just nasty. Gen 7 Beyond notably gave it Inner Focus as its hidden ability instead, which I guess can be technically better in some regards, but I think Flash Fire was ultimately the more interesting play, albeit in some cases it was probably a little busted, but at the same time, Flash Fire I always felt was a little bit underwhelming compared to, say, Lightning Rod, where you need to purposely get led into the attack in some form for it, rather than actively having it be placed as a trap. Because you're not going to often attack a Fire-type Pokemon with a Fire-type attack unless either you miss input, or you don't know what type it is on a first playthrough, or what their ability can be. Mind you, it also, I guess, depends on your age range and all that, because I definitely remember just going all Fire-type moves on a Pokemon when I was very little, and having frustrations against going, like, up against a Flareon, rather, for instance. But again, that's something that most players will grow out of pretty quick, I'd say. Entei behaved at large. I believe largely I was only here for about... Actually, where are my notes on that? Yeah, I cut out about 2 minutes there, just about. Entei, the Volcano Pokemon. Entei embodies the passion of magma. This Pokemon is thought to have been born in the eruption of a volcano. It sends up massive bursts of fire that utterly consume all that they touch, especially in Pokemon Ranger. Oh god, what a nightmare fight. So, on my way to my next destination, I noticed the new daily Mirage spot had spawned in, so I figured, why not? Let's check out this Mirage Forest. There's no reason I need to come here, but I figured, again, I might as well show off the ones I spot along the way, even though I don't necessarily stick to that throughout the entire LP. But this specific Mirage Forest is a little bit helpful if you like level grinding, because the hidden Pokemon here, who's also one of the main encounters you can find, is a pretty interesting one. This is Audino. Audino is a Gen 5 pure normal type, so it's weak to fighting, immune to ghost. Audino has a decent HP stat, and its defenses aren't anything to really laugh at, but it's not too fast or great at attacking. What's pretty interesting about Audino is that they have a higher than normal experience yield compared to other Pokemon. Meaning, if you wanted to grind levels, going up against a lot of these is pretty useful. Notably in Gen 5, there were ways to actively force encounters against this, which is pretty useful. Ability-wise, they can have Healer, Regenerator, or Klutz. Healer can potentially just randomly heal an ally Pokemon's status ailment. Regenerator restores HP when it's withdrawn from battle. Meanwhile, Klutz means it can't use any held items, which isn't exactly great. But worth noting, it does have a Mega Evolution here in Gen 6 that we're not going to get the Mega Stone for a little bit still. But since I'm probably going to go from one thing right into another when we get the Mega Stone, might as well talk about it. Mega Audino, notably in Mega Evolving, gains a Fairy subtype, so it is instead weak to Poison and Steel, but immune to Ghost and Dragon. In Mega Evolving, it gains a total of 40 physical defense, 20 special attack, and 40 special defense, making this a very tanky Pokemon with some really good immunities. It still has Healer for its status, for its ability rather, which doesn't sound the best, but worth noting, you can actively swap out Mega Evolutions mid-battle and they will stay in their Mega Evolved form, unless they actively faint, in which case you're out of luck there. If you're trying to potentially do some stall tactics or things like that, swapping out a Mega Audino could be far from the worst strat, but it's not something I personally like to rely on the whole. Cute design, though. Once I grab the hidden item here, though, it's time for us to put a cap on something that I technically mentioned we could do all the way on our first trip to Verdanturf Town. I believe prior to part 10? We got that intriguing stone for helping that girl find her shroomish behind the sign in the center of town. I mentioned then you can take that to Mr. Stone here at Devon and find out it's a Mega Stone. Let's finally do that. Ah, that intriguing stone you have. On second look, it seems to be a Pidgeotite, doesn't it? We got a Pidgeotite. I will never use it. To be carrying around a Megastone like that, it looks like you're also a bit of a connoisseur. Pidgeotite allows you to evolve the Gen 1 normal flying type Pidgeot into its Mega form. Pidgeot normally weak to rock, electric, ice, immune to ground and ghost, as most normal flying types are. Normal Pidgeot has a decent speed stat for as early as you can get it, which got even better in Gen 6, but it's not super standout, but it's still usable. Mega Pidgeot, though, normally gains a total of 5 physical defense, 60 special attack, 10 special defense, and 20 speed, making it very fast. In Mega Evolving, though, it goes from either having Keen Eye, Tangled Feet, or Big Pecs for its ability into No Guard, which, yes, means that you can never miss an attack, but it also means the opponent won't ever miss an attack, which means you need to be fast and furious with this Pokemon, otherwise you're probably going to take a lot of really bad damage really quickly. So right now, I just got some items back from the waterfall over Route 114, and worth noting, you can talk to an old man who's now on that route to grab the Mega Stones for the other 2 starters, but I don't do that until later. Next up, I'm actively back in Shoal Cave, because I wanted to come here at low tide. I want to say because of the time we were at earlier, I'm here between probably 8:35 and 8:50 at this point, which means I can enter and actively have low tide still. And I figured, you know what, while I'm along the way, I see a snow run here, I might as well catch it. I don't really need to, but I can. Snorunt, the Snow Hat Pokemon. Snorunt survives by eating only snow and ice. Old folklore claims that a house visited by this Pokemon is sure to prosper for many generations to come. I've always adored this guy, really cute. And it's notable I got a female one on accident there, because that actively ties into something we can do, technically, now that we have it, and a Dawn Stone. But I'm not going to do that. I'll talk about that more specifically later in this part for a very specific reason. So, while you're here at high tide, you can find the shoal shells littered around these areas you can surf on. But now that we're at low tide, we can access new areas that also allows us to find the shoal salt we need in order to get the reward from the dude who actively is at the entrance of this place. Also, I'm catching a Spheal because, again, why not? Spheal, the Clap Pokemon. Spheal always travels by rolling around on its ball-like body. When the season for ice flows arrives, this Pokemon can be seen rolling about on ice and crossing the sea. I don't know why, but Shooting Stars by Bag Raiders just started playing in my head. That meme died too soon. But at the same time, probably to die early in that regard rather than go on too long and end up having the whoa, 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 whoa meme thing happen to you. Like with shoal shells, I believe there are exactly enough shoal salts to get the active reward from the dude, but again, you can come back here the next day and these will have respawned in case you want to get multiple of the reward, albeit the Mega Stone I mentioned that we can get from the dude only happens the first time you get it, of course. With that said, and I do briefly leave in a few moments from here to go grab it, when you come here, make sure you have the Mach Bike in order to fully explore it, as there is a pile of that sand flow you can ride up with the Mach Bike that allows us to access an entire another floor that I do want to grab stuff from while I'm here. If you don't have the Mach Bike, well, I hope you're here before high tide kicks in, otherwise, you're gonna need to wait a potential good couple of hours before it comes back, but, luck may vary on that, I suppose. Although in that regard, I mentioned in No that if you actively change the 3DS's system clock, the game will detect that and not spawn in Pokemon at, like, the Mirage spots, like the legendaries, for 24 hours. I'm not sure how it handles areas like this in that regard. I'm assuming it would actively just change to the state you wanted it to. But at the same time, it'd be really funny if they just kept it at the state it was at until 24 hours have passed, just to be like, no, wait your turn. As annoying as it also would be to deal with, considering getting a little bit behind ourselves here. Back when I did the Soul Silver playthrough, I frequently changed my computer system clock to actively have the correct date or time to do certain things across it. This specific NPC will give us the Focus Band. If a Pokemon holds onto that and is about to be knocked out by a move in battle, there is, I think, like a 12% chance or something like that the focus band will activate and cause them to hold on with 1 HP. It's effectively sturdy as a held item, which is nice to have, albeit there is a much better variant of it that you can grab later on, but it's still nice to have in the case you're looking for a potential sacrifice or survival strat in some form. At this point, though, I have 4 Shoal Salts and 4 Shoal Shells, so we can finally turn them into this dude and get our rewards, the Shell Bell, as well as the Mega Stone in question. The Shell Bell is a held item I often underestimate. Don't use because of that. What the Shell Bell does is that if a Pokemon holding that deals damage, they then get HP restored to their max, equivalent to, I think, like an 1/8 of the damage they dealt, which can go a long way for making some Pokemon extend their presence in battle. But also, the first time you get a Shell Bell, you get a Slowbro Knight, allowing you to Mega Evolve the Gen 1 Water Psychic type Pokemon Slowbro. And here I am getting the Mach Bite because I need that to actively go do things more deep into Shoal Cave. So Slowbro, if memory serves, we technically don't see one that's in a fixed location in the LP. I already said Water Psychic type, so that means it is weak to Bug, Ghost, Grass, Electric, and Dark. Slowbro, as they are, is a really slow but really tanky defender with some good special attack on top of it. But in Mega Evolving, it gains 30 special attack and a whopping 70 physical defense, putting it at 180, making it have one of the highest defense stats at this point in the series, and it's still considered pretty high by modern standards. In Mega Evolving, it goes from either having Oblivious, Own Temple, or Regenerator as its ability to Shell Armor, so it won't get critically hit as well, making it even better as a tank in a lot of instances. So now that we have the Mach Bike, we're back in Shoal Cave, and we've now accessed its lowest floor, which is a giant frozen floor with the ice slide puzzle that we're oh so used to seeing in these types of floors ever since Gen 2. With that said, here in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, this is one of the easiest versions of this in existence because they didn't change its level design at all for the remake. But unlike the GBA version, we can move diagonally like that, meaning we can pull some tricks to get around it pretty quickly. We're here for 3 notes in particular, though there are a couple of other items here as well. First off, there's a Mega Stone here, of course, as you can see right there. Secondly, there's a TM I want to grab even if I don't use it on the loop back around towards the ladder. But also notably, on this raised platform towards the bottom is a giant icy rock. This is the counterpart to a mossy rock we saw back in Petalburg Woods right after beating Roxanne at Rustboro Gym. If you level up an Eevee near either of these, they will turn into one of their other evolutions. Over by the Moss Rock, you'll get the pure grass type Leafeon. Leaf Guard's a really good physical defender with abilities that either raise its speed or cure any status ailments during Sunshine. Meanwhile, Glaceon is what happens if you level up around this room with one, which either gets Snow Cloak or Ice Body for its ability. Leafeon in general is a pretty good special attacker, with some good physical defense on top of it, kind of a little bit of a counterpart to Vaporeon in that regard, albeit more focused on the defense stat than the HP. On the topic of the Glalie we just got, we actively have a set encounter with a Glalie coming up in the not-too-distant future, so I'm going to wait until then to talk about it because might as well while it's on topic more than anything else. For now, though, we're back on Route 129 because I have done everything I really want to do right now before we finally head over to Evergrande City and continue on with the game's main plot. Worth noting, you do need Waterfall to actively access Evergrande City, as we saw earlier in the LP, so make sure someone has that. I believe I specifically have that on the Vaporeon I evolved a few parts ago. Welcome to Evergrande City proper. It's literally just a Pokemon Center and the entrance to our usual Victory Road standard. Always found this place a little weird in that regard. The Paradise of Flowers, the sea, and Pokemon. Paradise maybe, not much of a city. So, a personal recommendation before you actively head into Victory Road up there. You're gonna want to head in there with Pokemon that know both Flash and Waterfall in some form. So if you have to go in with not your full main party you've chosen for yourself at this point, that's completely fine, I'd say. It's best if you can maybe put that on one Pokemon. Like, I think potentially Ludicolo would actually be really good for that, because they, I believe, can learn Flash, Waterfall, and Surf, so if you don't even want to have your normal Surfer around just for some reason, you could. But Victory Road in Hoenn is probably my favorite variation of this dungeon in general across the series. If it's not this, it's the one from Black and White. Because I really do like the layout of this one, on top of it having probably the best music for one of these areas in the series. Entering Victory Road. Let it begin. The final obstacle between us and the Pokemon League. This song always does remind me of Subspace Emissary, though, because it plays decently commonly in that little campaign in Smash Brawl. Oh, also, you're gonna need strength in quite a few places in here, but I'd say you're more likely to have that on your team than, say, Flash at this point, or Waterfall outside of just eating in Evergrande City. Waterfall is probably one of my least favorite HMs in the series alongside Whirlpool, because a secondary water-based HM feels like it just crowds up one specific Pokemon's moveset, so either you need a secondary water type, or you're just going to sacrifice usability in combat for your Surfer in some regards. It's always felt a little weird to me. But they do take advantage of one thing in this Victory Road. Since we already have the National Pokedex by this point, they're going to throw out Pokemon from outside Hoenn. For instance, this Ace Trainer is sending out the Gen 5 Pokemon Sigilif. Psychic Flying type, so it's weak to Rock, Ghost, Electric, Ice, and Dark, but immune to Ground. Sigilif for a single-stage Pokemon has a really good special attack sense and decent speed, and its defenses aren't anything special, but they're not anything terrible either. If you're looking for a Flying or a Psychic type with special attack focus that's decently fast, you can do a lot worse. I've used this to pretty good effect in the past. Ability-wise, it'll either have Wonder Skin, Magic Guard, or Tinted Lens. I know we've talked about the first two, but Tinted Lens makes it so that any moves that it uses against a target that are not very effective, it doubles the damage that they do, which can be kind of interesting, making it able to pretty much always have moves that are normally effective in some regard, but really depends on what you're doing with it. Next up, this guy also has a Rhyperior. This evolves from Rhydon when it's traded while holding the Protector item, which I don't think you can get in this game until post-game. Ground Rock type, so it is weak to Fighting, Ground, Steel, Water, Grass, and Ice, but immune to Electric. Water and Grass are notably 4 times weaknesses. Rhyperior is a nuts physical tank with great HP and physical defense on top of its insane physical attack stat. Ability-wise, Rhyperior can either have Lightning Rod, Solid Rock, or Reckless. I personally prefer the latter two myself, especially Solid Rock, just making it an even better tank. Lightning Rod feels a little redundant, but hey, it's nice to still have in the case you're doing doubles and you're throwing it out with something that's maybe weak to Electric-type attacks in some form or manner. Worth noting, by the way, while the trainers have Pokemon from Gen 1, 2, and 4 beyond in this specific version of Victory Road, the Pokemon you can encounter in the wild here are pretty much still the usual Gen 3 stuff. You can find Golbats, Loudreds, Hariyamas, Mawils, Layrons, Metachams, a lot of stuff you're used to seeing by this point from random trainers across the region. New to the region, though, here is Frostless. This evolves from female Snoruns when you use a Dawnstone on them. Ice Ghost type, so it's weak to Rock, Ghost, Steel, Fire, and Dark, but immune to Normal and Fighting. Frostless is a very fast Pokemon to get for your team that's pretty easy to get comparatively late into the game. It's got a good physical attack and special attack stat, but its defenses and HP aren't anything that's really that standout. But if you're looking to get your hits in fast on top of its typing, it can be pretty useful. It can either have Snow Cloak or Cursed Body for its ability. Snow Cloak raises the Pokemon's evasion in a hailstorm, which can be nice, but Cursed Body is the more interesting one. Effectively, I think there's like a 30% chance that when hit by a move, Cursed Body will just completely disable that move for the opponent Pokemon for like 4 or 5 turns, something like that, which is just nuts. So we're quickly back on Route 123 so I can grab that big route, because I also forgot to grab a Pokemon with Flash before coming in here, so I quickly left and grabbed Magna back. Mind, I say you should have Flash around here. You don't really need it in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire because you can see decently well without it compared to Ruby Sapphire and Emerald, but just for clarity's sake for the LP I might as well. So I might as well continue going over the evolutions we haven't talked about yet, considering it's been a few parts since we even started that topic. The two from Gen 2 we haven't talked about yet are Espeon and Umbreon. Their evolutions are tied to leveling up with High Friendship during the day or night, respectively. At the day, you get Espeon, which is a Psychic type with Synchronize or Magic Bounce. Espeon is a great special attacker with some really good speed to back it up, but its physical stats are far from anything interesting. Meanwhile, Umbreon is a Dark type with Synchronize or Inner Focus that has a really good special defense stat and some good physical defense on top of that. If you're looking for a tanky Eevee, that's probably overall your best choice. There's one other evolution to talk about, and it's the most recently added one all these years later even. But we have 2 new Pokemon coming up in this trainer battle, so let's talk about them first. Starting off, Grandma here is going to be throwing out one of my least favorite Pokemon to try to add to my Pokedex in most instances, Hitmontop. Pure Fighting type, so it's weak to Flying, Psychic, and Fairy. Hitmontop's got some okay physical attack and defense, but it really specializes in its special defense, which, for a fighting type prior to the physical special split, is honestly a really nice boon to have to help negate partially some of its weaknesses. But its learn set's kind of underwhelming for my tastes, and its abilities being either Intimidate, Technician, or Steadfast makes it one I just don't really enjoy using that much. Steadfast, by the way, I believe raises the speed of the Pokemon whenever it flinches. I've always largely preferred either of that Pokemon's pre-evolution's other two evolutions, namely Hitmonchan or especially Hitmonlee, but that's just me all these years later. Next up, she's throwing out the Gen 5 fighting type, Throw. Pure fighting type, so it's weak to Flying, Psychic, and Fairy. Throw is very slow, but it makes sense why, given its extraordinarily high HP stat, decent defenses, and great physical attack stat. Partner that with Guts, Inner Focus, or especially Mold Breaker for an ability, and you can have a Pokemon that can do some upsets, even if it moves a little bit slowly outside of Trick Room situations. Throw notably has a counterpart we'll be running into next part. I do prefer in a couple of situations, but I really do go back and forth on which of the two I actively ultimately prefer. It really depends on what I'm building my team around in Gen 5, and whether I need something that's a little bit faster, but can't take a hit as well, or something that's a little bit slower, but can really guarantee taking a hit. With that out of the way, let's now talk about the final evolution to date. Introduced in Gen 6 to help aid the introduction of the Fairy type, we have Sylveon, which evolves from Eevee if you level it up while it has high friendship and also happens to know a Fairy type move. Sylveon being Fairy is weak to Poison Steel but immune to Dragon, which is a really nice boon to have. Sylveon is a really good special defender that can throw a special attack out decently well that also has okay HP on top of that. Its physical stats aren't the best, and it's not the fastest, but you're not using it for those stats in a lot of instances. This can be a really good Eevee in basically any situation. But mind you, I'd say that's the case for most of the evolutions. They all have a place in a lot of teams. Eevee can be a real toolkit, depending on what you're building your team into, what you realize you're either lacking, or what you really want to super hyper-focus on. I personally prefer Vaporeon, but that's because I prefer the HP with an easily boosting physical defense move and absurd special attack. But that's just me. Notably, Sylveon can either have Cute Charm or Pixelate for its ability. Cute Charm we've talked about before, that can infatuate on contact. Pixelate, I forget if we've talked about before. I don't think we have, actually. Pixelate does, for normal type moves, what Aerolate did to them. It turns them into Fairy type moves when used by users with that ability. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 29, we're going to finish off Victory Road and finally make our steps into the Pokemon League. See you guys then.